Vikir sat with Chihuahua, drinking tea in the quiet office. He told him how he survived, rescued and nursed back to health by the barbarians. Chihuahua asked if he was really not a ghost. Vikir assured him he wasn't, and asked if that was why he fainted earlier. He added that it was good to see he hadn't changed. Tears welled in Chihuahua's eyes as he said he was glad Vikir was alive. Then he asked about the child with him, wondering if she was his daughter. Vikir said she might look like him, but she wasn't his child, though they were related. Chihuahua tilted his head slightly, curious how they were related. Vikir asked if he could look after her once he left. Her name was Pomeranian, and he wanted her to receive a basic education. Chihuahua immediately agreed, saying it had been too long since he last received an order from him. Vikir glanced at the pile of documents on the desk and asked if the workload was too much for him alone. He told him to find Cindy Wendy Messimadnaro for help. Chihuahua paused, remembering the criminal Vikir had released 2 years ago. He asked how he was supposed to find her. Vikir reminded him of the flower girl Judy, the one who received 10 billion. With that much money, she would have become a target, and Cindy Wendy likely would have gone to protect her. He told Chihuahua that if she refused to cooperate, he should tell her Vikir was alive. Chihuahua nodded, but then asked when he would return. Vikir said once he had finished what he needed to do. He looked down at his empty cup, thinking of the promise he still had to keep. Vikir thought the quickest way to cure Ahuel was with a drop of holy water. The only place he could get it was from the divine house of Corvadis. It wouldn't be an easy task, but it was his only chance. A horse and cart rolled up to the gates of a city. The guards raised their spears, demanding the driver stop for inspection. The man pulled out a permit and introduced himself as Joseph from the oil shop. One guard asked what he was carrying. The driver answered, barrels of oil. Another stepped forward to inspect one. As he approached, the driver's hands tightened on the reins, thinking, why did he have to choose that one? The guard lifted the lid and peered inside. After a moment he nodded. It was only oil. Looked fine, he told him, then put the lid back on. The other guard told him he may pass, then welcomed him to Saint Meca. The cart pulled into a deserted alley, and the driver nervously said they could come out now. One of the barrels moved. Then something broke through the lid. A man rose out of the barrel wearing a dark trench coat and a plague doctor mask. The man got off the cart as the driver nervously asked if he could go. The man told him to wait, then handed him a bag with an ox-bear tooth, just as he promised. The driver thanked him as he walked away. The driver, looking on in shock, wondered how the man had held his breath for over 2 hours in there. He asked himself if he was really human. The masked man now overlooked the city from a tall building. He took off his mask to reveal the man under it. Vikir. Vikir sighed and thought he hadn't held his breath that long since the river Styx. At least he had made it inside the Corvadis domain of Saint Meca, the most religious city in the empire. A bell rang above him, which he thought must be signalling prayer time. Then everyone stopped what they were doing to pray. Vikir walked the streets and wondered if he could ever live such a life. Night settled over the city as Vikir, still masked, stood beside a quiet well. He uncorked a small vial and poured its contents into the water. It contained a mixture of Ahuel's blood, sweat, and tears, highly contagious, capable of spreading the red plague. He knew what he was doing was extreme, but there was no time to lose if he was to save the girl's life. In a city this devoted to the divine, he was certain they would save anyone before a single life was lost. A group of children nearby spotted him and called out that someone suspicious was at the well. Vikir turned his head, his voice low and cold beneath the mask, warning them that the well had been cursed and that anyone who drank from it would face death. The children screamed and ran. Watching them disappear down the street, Vikir thought that would at least keep them from getting sick. He drew the dagger from House Leviathan and drove it into the stone floor next to the well, leaving behind a mark of supposed foul play. The rivalry between House Leviathan and House Quo Vadis had never been resolved. It would not take much for blame to fall in the right direction. With the groundwork set, Vikir turned away from the well. It was time to meet the spring of holy water, St. Dolores. Over at the cathedral, a large crowd had gathered at the news that the saint had returned to the city. They were eager to see her, some begging to be healed of their ailments. A heavenly voice echoed from beyond the massive double doors at the entrance, asking why they had come at such a late hour. 3 lords stepped forward, each wishing to see the saint and offering wealth, land, and power in exchange. The voice interrupted, telling them that was enough. It questioned why the doors should be opened so late for such frivolous desires, then commanded them to go home. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving only one figure remaining, a man in a plague doctor mask. Vikir stood silently, recalling his past life. He had often seen St. Dolores on the battlefield, always covered in blood and fighting to save others. As far as he knew, the saint had never coveted money or power. He stepped forward toward the great doors. The voice echoed once more, asking who he was. Vikir knelt and answered that he was a lost sheep. After a moment, the doors slowly opened as golden light slipped through the cracks. The voice told him to come in. Inside the main hall, the air shimmered with gold. Adornments lined every wall, and between 2 staircases stood a statue of an angel pouring water from a jug. Vikir walked toward it. The voice spoke again, this time coming from the statue itself. It asked what had led him astray. So she wasn't going to meet him in person. That made sense, given what he was wearing, he thought. He set a waterskin down near the statue and said he was there to report a plague spreading through the slums. He had brought water from the infected well, and they should be able to sense the evil energy coming from it. After a moment, the statue spoke again, saying he had lied. The doors behind him locked. From the balcony above the statue, a group of knights appeared, weapons drawn. A man stepped forward in front of them and demanded to know who he was. Vikir recognized him immediately. He remembered the man from his previous life, Peter Quorvadis, a man who once fought beside him on the battlefield, who had taught him the torture techniques he used on those underdog brats. Vikir remarked that it felt strange to see him again. Peter stared back, confused. Peter said Vikir looked suspicious and ordered him to remove the mask if he wished to meet the saint. Vikir dismissed him, saying he had his reasons for wearing it. He told them he had delivered his message and that his business here was done. A page from Peter's book flew past, striking the ground near Vikir's feet. Peter told him he could not leave. Vikir looked down at the paper. He could feel the divine energy running through it. So, he was still using that strange weapon. Peter jumped down from the balcony, landing before the statue. He said he could sense a strange power in the water Vikir had brought, and if it truly carried the plague, then he must be the culprit. Vikir asked why he would come to warn them if that were true. Peter replied that perhaps it was to lure the saint. Quick thinking, Vikir thought. Pages flew toward him again as Peter told him they could finish their conversation in the dungeons. Vikir leapt aside, scaling the balcony wall before springing off it. He stayed airborne, bouncing off the pillars until he was positioned above Peter. He couldn't use aura. It would reveal him as a Baskerville. He'd have to rely on something else. From above, he dropped with a kick. Peter crossed his arms to block it, and the floor beneath him shattered, leaving deep cracks across the stone. Peter's eyes widened. He felt as if a boulder had struck him. How could someone so lean weigh so much? Vikir landed lightly, flipping back. It was the first time he had used the strength he inherited from the ox-bear. He rushed forward again, fists striking like lightning. Peter blocked and dodged as best he could, but the pace was overwhelming. A burst of flame followed. Vikir's strike set Peter's book ablaze, scorching its cover and charring the pages. Peter dropped it, his hand blistering from the heat. Vikir taunted him, asking if he wanted more. Peter plunged his hand into the water flowing from the statue, cooling it instantly. He accused Vikir of using witchcraft and lunged forward with his fists. Vikir kicked the burning book into Peter's face, then drove his fist into his gut, sending him crashing back and shattering the statue. Peter hit the floor hard, coughing blood. The knights froze, stunned that Sir Peter had fallen. They jumped down, forming a defensive wall in front of him. Vikir asked if they wanted more, telling them to come if they did. Before they could move, a voice echoed through the hall. Enough. Everyone stopped as the saint stepped onto the balcony above. Her voice was calm, commanding. She asked if he was the lost sheep. Vikir answered that he was. She studied him quietly, then said he seemed more like a wounded puppy than a sheep. A guard protested, saying she must have seen what he did to Sir Peter. She dismissed him and told them to bring tea. She would speak with him herself. Vikir sat across from the saint as the scent of tea filled the quiet room. She looked young, 16 at most, he thought. One day in the future she would volunteer for the front lines of the demon war, saving countless lives. A true paragon of virtue. Vikir had always held great respect for her. The saint took a sip of her tea and spoke softly, saying she had been under some stress lately. She explained that she was studying at the academy, Colosseo, but had come here for her vacation to serve her family. Vikir wondered why she was telling him this. She continued, saying that people of wealth and power came here day and night, often for petty reasons or to free themselves from addiction. None of them suffered from real illness. God taught them to be just, to act with morality and kindness, yet people only saw what was right in front of them. Vikir recited quietly that theology was merely the process of understanding humanity. Her eyes widened in surprise. That was chapter 6, verse 9 of the book of Asmos, the Old Testament. She said she was impressed he knew such an ancient saying. Vikir told her a plague was spreading in the slums of Saint Meca. She asked if he was certain. He replied that he had brought the water as proof. Then she asked if he was involved. Vikir calmly said he wouldn't be here if he was. He reached for something, saying perhaps this would convince her. Peter, standing beside her, immediately stepped forward, shielding the saint. Vikir raised his hand, divine light flowing through it, and said he only wanted to prevent innocent people from being harmed. This city had once been his home. The saint's expression shifted to shock. She asked if he was a believer of Lun. Vikir let the light fade and asked if she would help him. He told her he had seen suspicious figures pouring a vial into a well. The saint asked who would do such a thing. People who wished to see House Quorvadis fall, he answered. He pulled a scroll from inside his coat and spread it on the table. His gloved finger traced the map, first to Leviathan territory, then to the bourgeois lands. House Leviathan would gain from the plague, collecting samples for their research while weakening their rivals in Quorvadis. The bourgeois family would buy land for cheap as its value collapsed and its owners fell ill or died. He said he was certain they were the culprits, though he was only speculating for now. The saint thought it over. His reasoning made sense, but one question remained. Who was he? He told her to call him Nighthound. She noted quietly that it was an ominous name. If what he said was true, she would have to go to the slums herself to investigate, she said. Dolores studied the man before her. He had defeated Peter with ease, yet his small frame gave no sign of the strength he carried. There was something more to him, the scent of beast and blood, of oil-soaked iron clinging to his very soul. She sensed aggression, rage, and hatred, and buried deep within that storm, a terrible sadness. Just what kind of person was he, she wondered. The saint and Vikir made their way into the slums, visiting a small church that served as a shelter for the sick. The nuns inside were startled to see the saint herself arrive. They hurried to her side, begging her to help those who were suffering. The saint's eyes widened at the sight before her. The floor was crowded with fevered bodies, the air thick with the smell of sickness. She turned to Vikir, saying he had been right. Vikir lowered his gaze, apologizing quietly. Innocent civilians were suffering because of him. He scanned the room and felt a small relief. There were no children among the sick. His earlier act at the well had frightened them enough to stay away. The plague was still in its early stages. The saint should be able to heal them, he thought. She knelt among the ill and whispered a gentle prayer. Her voice trembled with compassion as she told them not to be afraid. When she finished, a tear fell from her eye and struck the stone floor. Golden light burst from where it landed, filling the church with radiance. The windows glowed, spilling divine light into the slums outside. The people began to breathe easier as the red blotches faded from their skin. The nuns stood speechless at the miracle before falling to their knees, thanking the saint for healing everyone in the room. Vikir watched in silence. This was what he had come for. He needed to take that miracle back to the woodlands. Later that night, Dolores sat alone in a dimly lit room, marking a map with every new case that had appeared. She needed to find the source, the contaminated well. On the table before her sat a vial containing a sample of the plague. She studied it in silence, thinking how cruel its creator must have been. The disease killed slowly, forcing its victims to suffer until the end. She knew she had to locate the right well and purify it from within if she wanted to end their pain. A quiet sigh escaped her as she realized she had drifted into thought again. There was no time for that. She needed to return to the patients. As she stood, a wave of dizziness struck her. Her knees buckled, and she caught herself against the desk, breathing hard. She had used too much divine power. Still, she forced herself upright. She couldn't stop now. When she stepped outside, the 3 lords from earlier were waiting for her, offering their assistance. She listened, noticing how they spoke down to the people of the slums with veiled disdain. She sighed inwardly, then smiled politely and said she would gladly accept their help, masking her irritation behind a practiced expression. The men, clearly taken by her beauty, stumbled over themselves to follow her. They made their way to the camp designated for the sick. The 3 lords covered their mouths at the stench, complaining about the unsightly surroundings and offering no real help. Dolores walked toward the rear of the tents, glancing back at them. She had expected as much. They hadn't come out of kindness. Their motives were selfish and impure. Her gaze shifted to the nuns tending to the patients. These women embodied everything good in the world: commitment, compassion, the blessings of God. When she reached the entrance to the intensive care tent, she hesitated. The conditions inside were far worse. She steadied herself and stepped through. Inside, she froze. A man stood over a patient, slicing open an infected wound and channeling divine magic directly into it. The wound closed cleanly, the plague fading away. A priest beside him watched in awe. The technique was remarkable. It concentrated divine energy efficiently, making the healing more potent while conserving power. Dolores's eyes widened as recognition struck. That man, wasn't it Nighthound? She watched in silence, captivated by how effortlessly he balanced medicine and divine power. Vikir thought to himself that he could only wield this strength because of his past life. Normally, divine power required good deeds to maintain, but during the demon war, the gods had grown desperate. They had granted power freely to any soul who fought for their cause, allowing good deeds to be repaid later. Even the definition of good had shifted. Slaying monsters had become an act of divine merit. People called it the divine power advance. Those deeds had been etched into his soul, allowing him to still draw upon that same power within the domain of the faithful. A young girl cried for her mother nearby. Vikir approached and assured her he would tend to her at once. He examined the woman. She wasn't only sick, but malnourished. He handed the girl a gold coin and told her to buy food and firewood to care for her mother. A priest shouted at him to stop, warning that if he gave money to one, everyone would start asking. Vikir replied calmly, asking why that would be a problem. He only had a limited amount of gold. Once it was gone, that would be the end of it. Then he quietly asked for forgiveness. Dolores's breath caught. Had he just apologized? But why? She recalled the words he had spoken earlier about humanity's powerlessness. Did he truly think the same way she did? Was he sorry because he couldn't help more people? Her heart fluttered at the thought. She might have been a saint, but she was still 16, and for the first time, her heart beat faster for this mysterious man. The next morning, Vikir sat on a fence in a secluded corner of the camp, taking a brief rest. He lifted his mask slightly to take a sip of water, then lowered it again when he noticed the saint approaching. Dolores walked over and quietly sat beside him, asking if she could speak with him. Vikir told her she could. She thanked him for his help, saying that thanks to him, they had been able to heal everyone. Vikir replied that he had only done what needed to be done. She smiled softly, saying she knew he would answer that way. After a short silence, she spoke again. She said that perhaps someone like him should have been chosen to wield divine power instead of her. She confessed that she often felt too weak to carry the title of saint, wondering if there weren't others more deserving. Vikir told her that the very fact she worried about such things was the reason God had chosen her. His words caught her off guard. He added that the world needed people who could still shine even in the most wretched of places. Her eyes welled with tears. She began to cry and asked if she could ever become as strong as him. Vikir told her she would. In the days that followed, the priests gathered in prayer day and night until at last another miracle took form. 3 vials of holy water were created, its purity so potent that a single drop could cleanse all sickness within the surrounding area. They named it Plani de la Verge, the tear of the saint. The saint blessed the vials with a solemn prayer, infusing each with her divine power. Guards took them away to be secured in the vault, bowing as they thanked Dolores for her service. Afterward, she went to report to her father, the Cardinal of Lun, about the Red Plague. He commended her for her service, then asked her to recount everything that had happened. Dolores explained that they planned to use the holy water to purify the underground waterways. The Cardinal asked if they had found the source of the plague. She nodded. The well had been unregistered, which made it difficult to locate. They also had testimonies from children claiming that a ghost had cursed it. In addition, they had found the vial that had contaminated the water and other suspicious evidence. She presented a dagger marked with the crest of House Leviathan and a button from the bourgeois family. The Cardinal's expression darkened. His aura flared violently as divine energy rippled through the courtyard. So it was true. This all made sense now. He declared that war would be waged against those houses in the name of God. Then he turned to Dolores, saying that the man known as Nighthound was suspicious and would be arrested for questioning. Dolores panicked. She told him he was innocent, that he had worked tirelessly to save lives, and met his gaze with rare defiance, insisting that he was no villain. The Cardinal frowned. His once obedient daughter had been led astray by this man, he said. In that case, he would interrogate Nighthound himself. He raised his hand, releasing a column of golden light into the sky, a signal for the paladins to move. Moments later, paladins stormed the tavern where Vikir had been staying, but when they entered, the room was empty, the window open, curtains swaying in the breeze. A priest came running across the courtyard, pale with panic. He stammered that the vault had been breached. One vial of holy water was missing. Dolores froze as realization struck her. Was that what Nighthound had come for all along? Elsewhere, high above the city, Vikir stood on a rooftop. He opened a small sack and revealed the stolen vial, the tear of the saint. He looked at it quietly and offered his thanks before vanishing from the rooftop.